Hello. I like hearing stories about hair before I come on stage. Oh, boo-hoo to all these people. Long-haired stories. I think I'm a comic originally, but I love storytelling. I think storytelling is really important. I think it's dying, and I'm really glad that we do stuff like this. So I'm gonna start out by telling you guys a joke. Have you guys ever met someone that treated you so badly and bullied you so much that you hated everyone with his name? That's why I hate guys named Dad. I wrote that joke. That was like when I became a comic, I wrote a bunch of jokes about my dad. And I think it's because I was physically abused as a kid. I didn't realize it at the time because I'm an Arab. I thought it was just parenting. Yeah. But it did. It made me a comic, and I had a weird moment in my life. And when things fuck with me and rattle my brain a little bit, I like to write them down because I can't afford therapy. So I had this really weird moment where my dad passed away, and embarrassingly, I couldn't cry at his funeral. I tried to cry. It's a really weird feeling when you want to cry and you can't. And then Robin Williams died, and I bawled my eyes out. And that confused the shit out of me. So I started kind of writing down my memories of how this all happened or how I think this happened, and I think I know why. Our family was very mixed. I had a Muslim father and a Jewish mother, so unusual was our usual, right? And my dad moved to America first. Like a lot of immigrants, he came to America first alone to save money, so in case anything bad happened, we'd have some money in the bank. 1 year turned into 2, and I very vividly remember forgetting what his face looked like. And now as an adult, I think I know why my mom sent so many pictures. It's so that he wouldn't forget our faces. Like, she used to trace my hand in letters so he'd see how much I was growing. And I remember him in Egypt as a super happy guy. He was in a Beatles cover band. He joked around all the time. His name was Tino. His real name was Muhammad, but everybody in Egypt's named Muhammad, so they all have nicknames, right? But I always remember him being a happy guy, and my fondest memory is being on his shoulders and him dancing me around on his shoulders and calling me a prince. And then 2 years go by of me communicating with this voice on a phone and this person that I traced my hands for, and we get to Los Angeles in like 1978. And I see this guy in the airport that kind of looks like my dad, but the hair on his head was thinner, and the hair on his lip was thicker, and the smile in his eyes was completely gone. Racism is very much a part of the immigration process, and for men that come from countries where they don't believe in therapy, it eats away at them and it makes them angry people. So I blame racism for his anger and him starting to drink. I remember the first night that I knew things had changed is when I spoke during an episode of Murder, She Wrote, and he told me to shut the fuck up. And I was like, who is that guy? That's not my dad. I didn't recognize that person. And we were in a really strange neighborhood. We lived in East LA. It was a tough time for us. We didn't have a lot of money, so I lived in this really aggressive neighborhood, and a neighborhood that I learned I'm not allowed to smile at, because if you smile in the wrong neighborhood, it's an invitation for boys looking to prove their manhood to attack you. So I stopped smiling outdoors. Didn't smile outside anymore at all. And in Mexican culture, sometimes people give you a nickname that's the opposite of what you are. So tall guys get called shorty, right? And they get called opposites. They used to call me Joker because I never smiled. So I remember being in this apartment building in East LA, looking out the window and seeing a marathon for the first time. We didn't have marathons in Egypt, right? There was just a bunch of people running. And I remember watching and slowly starting to understand what a marathon was. And I started getting jealous of the people running. Like strangers were being nice to them and giving them water and like encouraging them and telling them to keep going. And I was like, fuck, why can't people be like that with immigrants? Like, we're going after a challenging goal, an exhausting goal, and instead of people giving us cups of water, they're yelling out mean shit. Like, learn to speak English, go back to where you came from. It was really fucked up. And at the time, I was watching a lot of TV because it's the only place I felt safe. I was getting bullied at home, I was getting bullied at school. So the walk back and forth school was my favorite time. And I come home, I was a latchkey kid. Before my parents came home, there's a show that came on that affected me like nothing else, and it was Robin Williams in Mork for Mork. You guys remember that show? I loved it because I was like, they called us alien. It's the opposite of what a human being is. So we're aliens on Earth, and I kept making all these ridiculous mistakes, and all of a sudden there's this alien on TV from a kinder, friendlier place. So I fell in love with the guy. And I didn't have a lot of friends. Like, I remember going to school and nobody wanted to be friends with the kid that showed up in a 3-piece suit and rolling luggage. Right? All the other kids were in jeans and backpacks. I looked like I was going to a sales conference in Phoenix. I didn't make it any better with my accent. Like, I remember the day that I became an outcast. It was when I went up to the man behind the counter and very loudly, but unintentionally, asked for a big piece of chocolate cock. I cringed when I remembered that the man was black. But it's also a nice memory because he laughed so hard that he had to walk away from the counter. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Oh my God, you're a funny kid." And then he gave me the biggest piece of chocolate cake he had. And I remember going, "Oh my God, he called me something that I know Robin Williams is." And I was like, "Wow, I'm funny. That's special." Before that, I was like a caterpillar in a school full of butterflies. And this was like my cocoon. It made me excited. And at the same time, I started watching more Robin Williams films. I started watching you forgot to put the Robin Williams picture up there. Oh, okay. Oh, it went away? Okay, so the next one is this next picture. I started noticing a pattern in all the other Robin Williams movies, like Moscow on the Hudson, for example. And the pattern that I noticed is that every single character he played, they all had the eyes of an outsider. They all had the eyes of someone wanting to fit in. So I didn't just love Mork for Mork anymore. I loved Robin Williams. So years go by, I'm going through all this crazy, this crazy shit in my life, and my dad finally passes away. And I can't cry, and everyone's looking at me. And I don't know what to do. I'm embarrassed that I can't cry. But I start to understand my dad's history. I went back to Egypt. I started doing a bunch of research, and I found out that my dad was abused too. And the guy that abused my dad was like a vampire. And he bit my dad. And it turned my dad into a vampire. And as hard as he tried not to, he ended up biting me. Now I have to go to therapy so I could be like one of the vampires on Twilight. Like, I could have a girlfriend. I could drive a Volvo, right? I could live in Seattle, right? I could do these things. But I remember it stayed with me. I felt ashamed. And I think I was always afraid to get into a relationship because I was afraid that the worst parts of my dad's personality were sitting dormant inside me. It felt like I was living in a haunted house and I didn't want anybody else to move in because I didn't want to treat anybody badly and I didn't want to have a kid and treat him the way that my dad treated me. And that's when I started, thinking about what I wanted to do with my life. Once my dad passed away, it was like somebody removed a GPS from my car. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to make him happy or make him impressed. I was trying to make me happy. And that's why I became a comedian. And I ended up in the Edinburgh Fringe in Scotland. And it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I just did 134 shows in 29 days. Yeah, it's insane. Thank you. It was like a sweatshop of comedy. It was the worst thing worst thing. I drank all my money away. It was horrible. But I remember very vividly a guy came out to me and he said, "Hey man, did you hear the news? Robin Williams killed himself." And I said, "No, I didn't hear that." And he said, "We're going to a bar. Come drinking with us." And I'm like, "No, that's okay. I'll meet you guys later." And I walked into a bathroom and I locked the door and I fucking cried uncontrollably for like what felt like an hour and a half. And in the middle of my crying, after a fucking hour, I started laughing. I realized that's what laughing is. It's that thing you do when you can no longer cry, right? And I started thinking, oh my God, I understand why I'm crying for this guy that I've never met before and why I didn't cry for my dad. So the dad that I fell in love with was still in Egypt. This is a different guy that I met in the airport. But all this time I was looking for a dad inside my house, I had another one looking at me from the inside of my TV set. And he taught me things that my own dad couldn't. Because where my dad was like a vampire, sucking the life out of people, Robin Williams was like the opposite of that. He would blow life and joy back into people, like an emotional version of CPR. Right? But he left me with one final father-son message in the tragic taking of his own life. So if you choose the noble profession that this man did, if you choose to make people, fill people up with life and joy and blow life and joy into people, you have to always remember to stop before you run out of breath. Thanks a lot.